Oh, hey, Odessa. How are you today?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Perfect. Now we'll start off with, how do you like your coffee in the morning?
As strong as possible. I've got nerding out. I bought a Hotel Shukla machine, the velvetizer, a few years ago. So every other day, if I can have the time and the ritual to do it, that would be my go-to because I mean, a bad cup of tea is bad, but a bad cup of coffee when you need it the most is kind of a bit diabolical and a little
Oh,
bit. It's one of those things that ruins your day. So if I can put the time into it, I will do it properly.
well, you just put the words out right of my mouth. If you start off the day, on a bad coffee, it just,
Yeah.
you're not starting on the right foot, are you? You want to start with a great cup of coffee that makes you feel awesome, that you can just sort of win the day already just from the start. I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
Now, for the
totally.
audience, what is it that you do and why do you do it?
So I am a LinkedIn ghostwriter. I also help companies with some of their website copy and like case studies and that kind of thing. So general wordsmith is probably how I would describe myself. But yeah, primarily it's LinkedIn content that I look in. And what was the other half of the question?
Yeah, and so and why are you a ghostwriter?
Well, I kind of fell into it. So I was working for an agency after looking for a job and doing lots of networking. And in order to find a job, I was kind of talking to people and realised that LinkedIn needed you to start generating your own content. So because I write everything down as well, I was coming up with these brilliant, for want of a better expression, like these bumper sticker phrases that people were saying that I ended up writing content about. And when I got hired by this agency, I was asked to do some sort of networking, but they didn't really want the writing side. So I was doing a lot of that in my own spare time as part of the networking. And then a couple of months in, somebody messaged and said, I really like some of the content you're putting out there. Have you ever thought about being self-employed? Which at the time I was kind of, I don't know why, but I was kind of like, if you're self-employed, you need a trade like a builder or a plumber or something. In my head, I couldn't quite, and because I don't have the experience in it, I was like, there's no way I could make a business out of this. This is ridiculous. But sure enough, I saw what he was doing, and I saw that actually there was a huge amount of ghostwriters and stuff on LinkedIn. So I jumped, and it's almost 2 years. And I frequently look back because running your own business is so scary, but it's afforded me so much flexibility and freedom I wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's why
Well,
I'm still
there's
doing
a
it.
ton to get into that. It's really interesting that you had this preconceived notion of what self-employment looks like, or what is a small business. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
going to be a tradie, you're going to be a tradie or a plumber or an electrician, something like that. And what is really interesting that you've almost, because like you said, you fell into becoming your own boss and you didn't even know ghostwriting for LinkedIn was, even a job or a thing. I always think back when you were
Sure.
at high school, when you're looking like, what's my career development? Where should I go? And I don't know about you, but what they used to say to me is, oh, the jobs that you're going to go into don't exist yet. And at the time I was like, sure. And I'm in the same, very similar path to yourself, where I'm doing things that weren't even a thing 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, and even 2 years ago. So you're right. That is the reality of what happens to a lot of small businesses, where you found your niche, you found your skill, and you've jumped in. What was the clincher for you? Like you said, you jumped in. What was that clincher where it was like, I'm going to do this, rather than just saying, oh, I could stay in my very comfortable, happy job? You went, nope, I'm going to
Oh, I
take that
wasn't
risk.
happy. So yeah, so I wasn't happy at all. Like um the first day that I joined that job, I got there at 9 o'clock and I'm trying to be friendly with people, but they had a puppy come into the office that day. This lovely little staffy puppy. and nobody really acknowledged that I turned up and didn't know what I was doing. My boss had a laptop and everything ready, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've never had such good onboarding where they've actually got equipment ready. Normally it's HR, I've got your laptop or whatever, we'll get it set up later on. And then I tried to log in and didn't have a password, wasn't working. Nobody could help me. Nobody was kind of making eye contact. And I think I was in there for about 2 hours before the boss got in. And so I said, oh, didn't you notice this? And I was like, clearly not. Didn't turn on the psychic network today to get those answers. And it kind of like, and it was funny because I did a podcast around the time and I listened back to it recently, and you know, my manager was quite happy to let me do it, because, you know, it was promotion for them, because I was, you know, tagging that I was working with them now and stuff. And I listened back to it, and there was so much at the time that I was saying that I already knew I didn't feel. So things like, you know, I like what I'm doing, the team's really friendly and that kind of thing. And they didn't even tell me where the toilet was. They weren't even showing me how to open the fridge. So all my, like, I had the drinks fridge because I couldn't get the door open, and I would wait for the rest of the team to go out of the kitchen or something so that I could furiously try and get this fridge open, and then give up, sit by my desk and just accept that it was going to sit with the drinks all the time. And it's having multiple experiences like that where companies didn't really care about how you settled in. They weren't really interested on how you felt about the organisation you were joining, only that they didn't want it to set back their current workload any more than your absence already had. So and I work with a client who's a recruiter, and one thing that, you know, somebody he was working with said is that you're not really useful to a new business until after that 3-month period, because you've got lots of questions and everyone's got to show you stuff and you don't know how to use things and you've not been introduced to stuff. But those 3 months are that time period where you're most likely to lose a new hire because they feel so overwhelmed. And I'd already done that with a team that didn't speak to me for 3.5 months because they'd been working together for 15 years. And I'd got to a point where I was approaching my 30s and I was just like, I can't do this again. I can't try so hard to be accepted by a team and feel like I was just going to be ignored. So I was like, the person I thought I would be working with seemed like he was a good guy and we got on really well and it was quite a supportive environment. So I was like, I could always go back into employment if it doesn't work out, but I'm going to have to try it. And I'm very much of the generation or the opinion that you need to have a bit of paper to prove that you have the right to do a job that you charge other people for. And I don't have that bit of paper, and it's a huge source of my imposter syndrome, I think.
And there's you know, really two things there. So the first is really highlighting the importance of, you know, employee onboarding. What we're talking about is, you know, if I'm working with my clients and I always work with the marketing department. You know, if we're bringing on a new person in the marketing department because we need them to do, you know, like some, let's say like ghostwriting or copywriting, just as you all, and I'm going to parallel this onboarding a new employee and onboarding a new client. So people listening who will say, well, I'm never going to onboard a new client. This applies to hiring a new employee. This applies to getting a new client. Those first 3 months are absolutely paramount for that user experience, because little things, where the toilets, how do I open the fridge, all of this is very much information that can be systemized and automized through video, through documentation, and just spending just 15 minutes a day with you, particularly in the first couple of weeks, just going through the little snags through buddy systems. That, you know, we're talking here is rocket science at all, but as you've expressed, because the constant just that rubbish experience of repeatedly and consistently over time has now led you to, right, I'm now gonna go and do something for myself because I just don't want to go through that experience anymore. And you've proven that it's still a prevalent thing. Now, I love that you've again brought up imposter syndrome, and it's something that's come up on this podcast a few times. I think every business owner has felt it, or even an employee has felt imposter syndrome, whether in personal life or in business life. And my big take from it is, in order to build confidence, you just need that undeniable proof that you can deliver what it is that you say you can deliver. But unfortunately, it's to do that proof, to build that experience, that undeniable success takes time. And so, have you got any top tips on how you live through that imposter syndrome period where you doubt yourself?
I doubt myself on a daily basis, because especially in an industry like social media, what people want from the platform can potentially change hour by hour. And I find that, like, I'm the type of person who wants the physical CD in their hand. I don't want to stream everything. I like that kind of tangible, real, let's make an investment and see a return. But social media, you're making an investment that in 2 days' time, if it hasn't given you a return, you want to get rid of. And marketing being so, being almost the first thing that people get rid of when it really ought to be the last. That sort of throwaway attitude I find quite difficult to reconcile, which probably adds to the imposter syndrome somewhat. For me, what's helped is making a network of people around me that are also small business owners, who are authentically, transparently themselves, who are willing to say the things that they've struggled with, are willing to give tips on how to overcome it. But they're also ending up being your biggest cheerleaders. So they see the things that you can't see. And at some point, I will do the real work, which is taking those compliments, those things that you hear, and actually allowing it to feel better about myself. I think we get into this habit of, especially in British culture, not to say that we're the worst, but we don't like it when people tell us we're good, because that's ego and it's pride and it's a bad thing, and we don't want people to single us out as being brilliant, because that makes us uncomfortable, or what about everybody else who's doing well? And all we end up doing is we make those compliments those tiny shreds of sunlight that could completely change the way we feel about ourselves and the way we do our businesses, and we turn them into something that's essentially quite transactional. Like, it's a one-off, single-use compliment that makes you feel bad in your dark time, but we don't have them written down, or we don't have them somewhere saved on our phone so we can read them to reaffirm it in our moments of not misery but meditation, to allow it to become the way that we see ourselves, because it's obviously so obvious to other people. And I think that is a problem with social media. Not to be totally down on it, because it's what's given me a job. But it's not always relying on the online. It's about making sure that whatever connections you make online, you're still making authentic ones offline with people who genuinely have your best interest at heart.
Now, this might be, first, if it's an obvious compliment I could give to you is if you have not only started a business, but you have grown a business now over the last 2 years that was formed from referrals and formed from people asking you for the service. I think that is a very clear indicator for me that, one, you're doing the job well, two, not only is it being recognised by other people, but then it's informing people to do action. Because there'll be, 7 more people who will see that you're doing a good job but won't do an action on it. So then if there are people who are doing an action on it, they're just the small people that are saying to you, hey, Odessa, we think you're doing a great job, and we value what you're doing, and we want what you're doing. So I think if you're one of the takeaways from today, you should be super proud of yourself from. And that's from sort of me to you.
Thank you.
Really love that. The emphasizing the authenticity of that, and having that community of like-minded people around you. But I know you're writing on behalf of other people, and what would you say So you might have more insight and knowledge into how to pick up on people who aren't authentic. So what do you have any top tips on how you would identify, I don't know if lying is the correct terminology, but maybe that sort of false egocentric telltale signs. What are your sort of top tips to spotting the difference?
I think the biggest one for me, because I know one of the things you want to talk about is AI, and I think the use of AI to bolster people's lack of confidence with content is usually a telltale sign. Most people will say that AI generated content doesn't have that soul, that human feel to it. And for a lot of people, that seems like such a strange concept. But such a knobby word, but my superpower, for want of a better expression, is being able to read into. I'm quite a big empath, so it's looking at people's tone of voice. And part of what the efforts that I put into making copy for my clients is thinking about the relevance and the placing of every single word. What does it mean? What does it add to the sentence? What does it mean to the audience? What would your individual reader, in the way they engage with it? There's so much thought, and I'm not going to say it's the same for every writer, but there's so much thought when you go into every single word, that the people who are genuinely showing up as themselves, you are going to notice maybe spelling errors or grammatical errors because they haven't relied on spell checking. Now, I'm not condoning it because I am a stickler for attention to detail and things like that, but a telltale sign for me of somebody who says, "Oh, I'm really struggling with social media, but this is my post, and like I've done it. Be proud of me. I'm proud of me." And you're like, right, first of all, nobody really talks like that. The bigging yourself up. If we're totally honest, most of us put ourselves down. So anything with that kind of undertone of pride, I'm always a little skeptical of. I also think about when I have ever tried out AI like ChatGPT and things like that, you have to put so much of a prompt to get any kind of output. So then you think, well, what would an average person put as that prompt? And you're looking at, I want a short post on LinkedIn about unplugging at the weekend. And it will be, unplugging at the weekend will be da 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 da. And you'll see lots of the same words used because they've become like an SEO keyword, which, by the way, AI is brilliant for SEO. But you will notice like overuses of certain words, or if this is why I quite like video. I hate making video content, but love watching it purely because when you're seeing somebody moving in real time, and they might have scripted it, but you get a feel for authenticity on somebody's body language and whether or not they sound like a robot. And then you go and read their content and you're like, this doesn't match up because totally cringeworthy like insights. There are clients where if they've got quite a strong accent, I will try and read back what I've written in that accent, because if I physically, I'm not saying I'm very good at taking accents at all. There are some I'm like amazing at, but others just terrible. But if there are words where I physically can't get the sound out because of the accent, then I'm like, well, that's not the right word to use. And you've got to think about the person's age or the industry they work in. Are they likely to use those kind of words? So there's a lot of things that actually, if we were sat in front of that person, we would be able to tell like almost immediately. And I think sometimes we forget that we still have that intuition, even if they're only sat virtually with their content. It's like a really long answer for a very short question.
But that is, what you're saying is absolutely true. And the other way, the analogy, the other way to look at it is, the Hollywood actors and actresses spend weeks and months, especially when they are playing a real person, where they have to do the physical acting along with it. But even, let's say, a personator, when somebody's doing an excellent impersonation because you can hear the intonation, you can hear how their tongue moves around their mouth, whether depending on what they're where they're from. So for instance, I don't think I have a strong Northern English accent, yet every Northerner that I meet know instantly that is exactly where I'm from. Whereas if I go from around the world, they're a bit like, where? We're not sure. But, that's the the person picking up on very small intonations and phrases of how I say things just from, the background. And you're right, people will use certain phrases naturally over and over again if they like particular words. I bet once I've done enough of these podcasts, AI will probably be able to take my voice, or you'll be able to take my voice just listening to enough of these podcasts and I know exactly how I break my sentences, which words I like to use, how do I intonate things. Because you're right, and then people will sit there and go, wow, that really does sound like Charleh. Like, good work.
Yeah.
But that's your skill. That is the value that you're adding.
Yeah, there are. So I always say to my clients when I start working with them, I was like, it's probably going to be like the first posts that I do for people. If I do them quite close to having a call, they're usually like, oh my goodness, that like sounds just like me. And then you'll get a couple of, like I said, but just give it time because it settles down. So I think it's like sort of week 2 or week 3 of writing for somebody, where it then starts to settle and they might have a few notes and stuff like that. But after that point, it would be more industry wise, this is the language we would use, which because I don't have experience in their sector, I wouldn't have necessarily known. But their feedback is no longer on, this is actually what I would say, this is how I would phrase that. So the type of feedback changes because as humans, we have this ability to listen. And I think we take it for granted because we only think about listening for the information that we can store in our brain and regurgitate on a post or in a conversation. But there's so much listening that we do to a person's tone of voice, to a person's vocal pattern, to you can hear when somebody's nervous. They sound totally fine. But if you're really tuned in to that person's voice, you can hear nerves, you can hear everything. But it's we kind of, there are certain skills that I think we've taken for granted and we don't realise just how much we rely on them. And then you speak to maybe people, I've got a couple of connections who are deaf or partially hearing. I've never questioned that before. But you can, like, when you listen to the way they talk, like without being able to hear, they don't know what tone of voice they're using. They don't necessarily know how their words are being formed because they can't necessarily hear. And so when you take away those natural abilities, that's when you realise just how important or how special those skills are and how we just need to tap into them and be a bit more aware. Because I think if we got better at listening, then we also get better at listening to that. Most of us have like an internal dialogue, or at least I hope we do, because I definitely do.
About 50%. It's about 50%
really?
people who my monkey brain goes on and on. And I didn't realise only 50% of people have that conscious internal monologue voice around in their head. Not everybody has it. And I didn't realise it was as big as 50%. So
I'm pleased that it's about 50% because I think if only less, I'd start being concerned. But it's one of these things where, like, if you do have that internal monologue or you are listening to how you sound when it comes out of your mouth, there is so much you learn about yourself and you start becoming a lot more in touch with how you're feeling in a certain situation, because you will choose words that reflect your mood even if you haven't realised it.
Absolutely. My biggest tip on this one is when you come up against something bad or terrible or a problem, I'm going to use specifically the word problem here. Your instinct is to have that negativity, to have that panic, to have that anxiety. Now you can see all these different adjectives I'm coming through with now. But then as soon as you go, no, I'm going to stop, breathe. I'm going to change this phrasing from I have a problem to I have an opportunity. suddenly the brain's thinking, great, I've got an opportunity. What ideas can I do? What things can I get? The word can is far more positive. Idea is far more positive. Action is far more positive. It just puts you in a better state in order to overcome what's in front of you. Now, just on kind of that subject, I want to just go back to when the feedback loop you were talking about with your customers. Now, technically, anybody, any business owner could write authentically in their own voice. That's because it's your own penmanship, so to speak. But what I know from my experience being in years of marketing, and you've also alluded to this as well, is that ideas creation, ideation stage. How do you help your customers, your clients, get over idea paralysis and start getting from this is what they want from absolutely they're just stuck?
So I think like a crucial part of that is a lack of ideas, a lack of ideation doesn't come from a lack of creativity. It usually comes from a lack of confidence and from your own internal self-limiting beliefs. I don't think that there is anybody on this planet who doesn't have the ability to create, who doesn't have the skills to be able to post content. I think I'm lucky to do it for other people. I'm lucky that my ability to think through things very quickly and to come up with ideas for people, because that's a big part of what I do. I'm very lucky that people entrust me to do it, but I also understand the mental burden of what am I going to write today? How am I going to make this interesting? Oh, we're talking about pensions again, right? So what are people know what a pension is. People know they should be paying in one. People are hoping they'll have a private pension when they, want to leave work. How can we make this interesting? And there are some creators who are just like, well, the world needs to know, so here it is. And there are other people who, hopefully, the ones that I tend to work with, where I write the content for them, and I was like, just think about it. Before you had the jargon, the understanding, the technical knowledge, you were the same as your audience. You didn't understand it. Nobody talked about it. You didn't know who to ask those questions to. What questions did you have? And they'll be like, well, I didn't understand how to build up my pension pot. I didn't know how it works with tax and, multiple income streams. And I was like, right, so that's what we're going to write about. We rightly or wrongly, we're quite selfish in that when we're writing our content, how does this make me look? What will people think of me? Will people trust me? Am I the qualified person to talk about this? Somebody could do it better than me. Why would they come and talk to me? And we forget that content is really about sharing value. You need to give your audience something that they can act on, whether it's an idea that they will start subconsciously working on, or a tip that they can start acting on right now. If we're thinking about what we can give to others, then that's when the conversations become easier to write, the engagement becomes better quality, and you actually start winning business through LinkedIn because you stopped thinking so much about yourself.
I think
which is no easy feat.
Absolutely, it is no easy feat. We all as humans, it's our innate evolution to look after number one. It's a survival instinct, and as we now live in this very comfortable world of roof and running water and food supply just available, the next thing we have to worry about then is then looking after sort of ourself, our identity, our being. And I think as a sort of a nice sort of end to the podcast today, I think that is a really great point. Stop worrying about what other people think, stop worrying about how it's going to perceive, and just make action happen and reflect on how it can be improved. Just those two things. Just put it out, stop worrying, how can you make it better next time? Now, we've really, it's been an absolute pleasure today to listen to your process and how it works, and sort of the real insight into the real skill and value of copywriting and ghostwriting in we're now living in this AI emerging world. Is there one thing that a person can buy from you for under £100 that would add a ton of value to their lives?
Honestly, probably my time, but I tend to give a lot of that away for free. If you read any of the recommendations, and if you speak to people who've had a one-to-one with me, I used to work in recruitment, so I love asking questions. And that kind of process that we went through about if you were, take away your qualifications and what you know now, if you were thinking about you back then, what did you need to know? So for me, I take people through that process. It's having that fresh eyes approach to your business. And one thing that I would always recommend, because I tend to give the value more than pay me for what I do, is look at your competitors as collaborators and see what content they're putting out there, not so that you can copy it, but it will help you develop your tone of voice and, okay, well, that's how I would have phrased it, because we naturally edit other people's content in our heads. I would have phrased it this way is usually probably what you'd say. But start thinking about the things that they're not talking about. So they might, gosh, this is a terrible example. They might be talking about pensions and, gosh, you need to save up, but they're not talking about other income streams or other ways of making sure you've got an income into retirement. So if you're looking at other forms of content, other sources of writing, and you're able to see the bits that they're missing, you've got an immediate strategy there, an immediate topic to establish yourself as an opinion on. So yes, my time is probably, and these kind of conversations are probably the most helpful for people. And I do charge for formal sessions, but I'm quite happy to just give my time, because I know how hard it is, and I actually like the workout of thinking of these random ideas for businesses that other people think are completely unmarketable. So yeah,
not so amazing on that. No, it's an excellent answer for the mind gymnastics, the mind gym. I'll make sure to link all of your website and contact details, because you also do have a podcast, and I'll put all the links into the variety of different places that this podcast will get shown, especially on social media. We'll talk about social media. It is on social media. And then everybody can be able to contact you and help them get out of that ideation paralysis state and start making action with words. Thank you so much for coming on to Charleh with Friends. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And we'll hope to see you again soon.